Welcome to another episode of Youth Got Next. We are here going through scripture as we have been for quite a while now. So long, actually, that today we are on stop 28. And I'm YPT, Pastor Tom, one of the youth pastors here at High Street. And I'm here today with Sophie, who is one of our youth leaders and on staff. And we're going to talk about what I am fascinated by, a very interesting subject, and that is the book of Ezekiel. Which, if you've never read Ezekiel before, it's big, it's long, kind of hard to understand sometimes.
Definitely.
Would you agree?
I would agree.
But way far into it, in chapter 37, there is this image and story where God basically gives Ezekiel a vision. I think that's the best way to describe it. And the summary is a valley of dry bones. And when I think about that, I think of Mario. What do you think about?
I would also think of Mario.
Mario. Yeah. Little characters that, and then they come back up. So what's the deal with this valley of dry bones?
Yeah, well, chapter 37 really jumps right into it. And he says that the Lord took me and essentially gave me a vision. And I see this valley full of dry bones. And so the Lord tells Ezekiel to prophesy over the dry bones. And he says to tell them to come to life. And the bones eventually come together and they eventually have meat on their bones again. And they look like people, which just take a second.
Wild.
And stop and try to envision that for yourself, because I don't even think that I fully have it comprehended.
Meat on your bones. I love the question he asks. Son of man, can these bones become living people again? You ever seen dry bones?
Yeah.
Like actual dry bones?
Well, not of people,
a
but of an animal.
I've seen people too, but to think that they would come back to life, what is that? That's usually an element of either a horror story or something scary.
Yeah, like that, I would be running in the opposite direction, leaving a little dust cloud behind.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. So then,
but here they are, and God goes, "Do you think they can come back to life?" I love Ezekiel's answer. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Which is a good answer.
That is a good answer.
Because sometimes God asks us stuff, and we're like, "I don't think that's possible, but maybe."
Maybe.
You tell me.
You're God. And so, yeah, then after that is when God tells Ezekiel to prophesy to the dry bones. And they come back together and they have muscle and flesh on them again. But it says that they're not moving, that they're without life. And then God tells him to prophesy again and says for the winds to come from every direction and to come over them, and that the breath of life would come back into them. So that's just crazy to think about, is like, not only have these bones come back together, but then they're just standing there or sitting there lifeless. And then God tells them to prophesy again, and these winds come out of nowhere. And then suddenly they're back to life, like moving, breathing, living. Yeah. That would be absolutely crazy. And then, Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about what happens next?
Well, I think it makes me think of two things. One, Adam and Eve started this way. God created them and then breathed life into them. But really, if you look at Scripture, this happened again later in the life of Israel. Now, this was a promise that God was giving to Ezekiel to say, hey, the people are in a bad way, and the nation is not doing so well, but I want you to know that there's hope. Yeah. And so that's why he gave them this vision. And if you fast forward, which we always do, and go back and look at the New Testament, there's actually a scene that is very similar to this scene of the dry bones. And it's over in John chapter 11. The man Lazarus, who's a friend of Jesus, has died. He's been in the ground 4 days. And everybody goes, Jesus, you could have kept him alive. And Jesus goes, yeah, I know I could have, but I have a better plan. And so in this conversation about what is happening and what could happen, Jesus tells Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. And so I love this because the pointer from Ezekiel to Jesus is very clear. God is the only one who can take what is dead and bring it back to life. And without him, we have no hope for eternity. But with him, we have hope for resurrection, because he can take what literally is dead and give it life again. And then after he tells Martha that this is possible? And she goes, yeah, I know it's possible one day. He goes, no, 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 watch this. And he literally brings Lazarus back from the dead. So for us, I think the story of Ezekiel is a great reminder that God is a God who gives life. God is the God who restores. God is the God who wants to see people live eternally with him. And that's one of many reasons why he gave that vision to Ezekiel.
Absolutely. And I think that comes out the most in verse 11 when it says that he's hearing the people of Israel and they're saying, "We've become old, dry bones. All our hope is gone. Our nation is finished." And I read that verse and I don't think, like, I've never been in exile. I've never been dry
Mm,
bones before, but I've
same.
gone through some pretty hard things that's made me feel like that. Like all of the hope that I've had has just been sucked out of my body.
Yeah.
But that is a great illustration of like what you said, like God promises that he is a restorer
Hmm.
and that he loves us and that he sees when our hope is not in us anymore, when we've lost all of our hope. And it may not be on this side of eternity, but he promises to restore all things when we have that relationship with him.
Yeah.
That every tear will be wiped away and that sorrow will be no more when we're with him in eternity. So, even though things can be pretty difficult here on earth while we're living, not as difficult as coming across dry bones coming to life, but
That's a pretty tough one.
it's a pretty tough one to beat.
For those of you who are listening today, I think that a good question that you should ask yourself is, where is it that I've given up hope?
Mm,
Where is it that I feel like hope is gone? And are you looking to the God who gives hope so much so that he actually is able to bring dry bones back to life? And through Jesus, who is the first fruit of resurrection, he says, like Sophie said, we have hope for today. We also have hope for eternity. And that is the message of the Valley of Dry Bones.
yeah.
So that wraps up Stop 28 for us. Youth Got Next. We're doing our flyover through the Bible. Until next time,
See ya.
see ya.